There are places that look like they were designed to be admired from a distance. Lofoten is not one of them. These islands don't sit politely on the edge of Norway. They erupt from the sea-sharp, narrow mountains pushed straight into the Arctic sky, with fjords cutting deep between them like cracks in stone. From above, it's almost too perfect. Bright wooden houses near the water, a thin ribbon of road clinging to the coastline. Tiny harbors where boats look like toys beneath cliffs that feel impossibly tall. And then the light, sometimes soft and golden, sometimes cold and metallic, turning the whole landscape into something that doesn't quite feel real. But then you get closer. Because beauty isn't the same thing as welcome. The sea here is not a decoration. It's freezing, powerful, and quickly offended. The mountains don't leave room for easy shortcuts. Storms don't ask for permission. And in the colder months, daylight can shrink until it feels like the world is operating on a schedule you never agreed to. So the obvious question isn't, why do people visit Lofoten? It's something else. How does anyone live here? How do you build a routine on islands shaped by wind and water? How do you raise a family where the weather can change faster than your plans? How do you keep a business running when the season that brings life can also bring crowds, and the season that brings quiet can also bring weeks that feel like they never fully wake up? And yet, people do live here. Not a handful of explorers, real communities, real jobs, real lives that begin early, end late, and revolve around the same forces that have controlled these islands for centuries. Which leads to the central question. If life here is so demanding, why do people stay? Lofoten sits far north, stretched out like a broken necklace off Norway's coast, above or near the Arctic Circle, depending on which line you draw and which island you stand on. It's close enough to the Arctic to feel its influence every day, but still connected, still inhabited, still active, still woven into the modern world. That balance is the first mystery of Lofoten. Remote but not abandoned. Wild but not empty. Harsh but somehow home. The answer starts with something simple. The sea. Before the roads, before the bridges, before the idea of a scenic route. The ocean was the original highway. It carried people in, moved goods out, and decided which villages would thrive and which would have to fight for every winter. Long ago, the people who settled these northern coasts weren't looking for comfort. They were looking for opportunity. And in Lofoten, opportunity didn't grow in fields. It moved. It swam. Every year, cold currents and seasonal rhythms bring fish into these waters in numbers that shaped history, especially cod. For generations, the timing of the catch became a calendar more reliable than any printed schedule. When the fish arrived, life accelerated. Boats left the harbor in darkness. Workdays stretched. Money entered the local economy, and the islands, for a while, felt like the center of something bigger than themselves. Here's the retention hook most travelers never consider. Lofoten wasn't built by tourism. It was built by a working coastline. And later, you'll see how that work left a signature so visible that it became part of the landscape itself. Wooden structures that look simple at first glance, but represent one of the most important traditions in the North. Over time, trade routes formed, methods improved, communities organized around the seasons. A place that looks like the edge of the world became connected to markets far away, because what came from these waters could travel. But that doesn't mean life became easy. It only became possible, because in Lofoten, everything you gain from the sea comes with a trade. The same water that feeds you can also shut you down. The same weather that paints the mountains in perfect light can also turn a routine day into a waiting game. And if you want to understand why people stay, you have to understand what they're always negotiating with. Not each other, not the government, not even the economy. The first negotiation is with the sky. Ask anyone who lives this far north what defines their life, and sooner or later the conversation circles back to weather and light. Not because it's a small talk topic, because it's a system that controls everything else. A clear morning can become a different world by midday. Fog can erase a mountain that was dominating the horizon 10 minutes earlier. Wind can arrive so suddenly it feels personal. And in winter, The cold doesn't just change how things feel, it changes what's realistic. Here's the difference between visiting and living. Visitors plan around the forecast. Locals plan around uncertainty. It decides when boats leave, when they return, when the sea is generous, and when it demands caution. It decides whether a ferry runs smoothly or becomes a story you tell later. It decides whether a delivery arrives on time, or whether the supermarket shelves look a little too familiar by the end of the week. And that's a quiet, open loop worth holding on to. On islands like these, supply isn't just about money, it's about timing. Later, we'll come back to what that does to everyday costs, why certain things feel ordinary in big cities, and strangely expensive when everything has to travel, wait, and sometimes turn back. Roll. Summer midnight sun over mountains, then a quick cut to winter twilight. Then there's the light. In summer, the days can stretch until night stops behaving like night. The sun dips low, hovers, and returns, as if the sky forgot how to close the curtains. People work longer, hike later, fish and travel, and live as if time expanded. But Lofoten always collects what it lends. In winter, the light can retreat. The sun stays low or absent for long stretches, and the world becomes a place of short windows, brief daylight, tea, long shadows, and a kind of quiet that feels heavier when you're not on vacation. That's where the second big question appears. Not, can you survive winter here? But can you live with it? Because this is where Lofoten begins to separate people. Some come for the summer and fall in love with the postcard. Then winter arrives, and the postcard becomes a test. And the surprising truth is this. For many locals, the difficulty is not only the storm or the cold, it's the rhythm. The constant need to adapt without dramatizing it, to accept delays without rage, to build a life that doesn't collapse when a plan gets rewritten by wind. That mindset, steady, practical, patient, didn't appear by accident. It's the result of generations learning the same lesson again and again. Here, nature is not an enemy you defeat. It's a force you cooperate with. This is why life in Lofoten can feel different from the rest of the modern world, not because it's stuck in the past, but because it never fully believed in the illusion of control. And that brings us to what we're really exploring, not just scenery, not just things to do. We're exploring a way of living that still revolves around essentials: work, weather, community, and the sea. In the next part, we'll step into village life, the pace, the routines, the unspoken rules that make small communities function in a place where conditions can change overnight. And we'll look at the identity Lofoten holds onto, an identity that isn't written on brochures, but built into how people work, how they prepare, and how they endure. Because Lofoten is stunning. Everyone sees that. The real mystery is how stunning can also be hard and still be worth it. In Lofoten, the day doesn't begin when your alarm goes off. It begins when you look outside and decide what the sky will allow. That sounds dramatic until you've lived it, because the weather here isn't a backdrop. It's a schedule. Wind changes what is safe. Fog changes what is visible. Swell changes what is possible. And the people who stay don't waste energy pretending otherwise. They build their lives around flexibility. One moment, the water looks calm enough to mirror the mountains. The next, it turns restless. And everything that depends on the sea work, deliveries, travel starts to move a little slower. That's why locals develop a kind of quiet readiness. Not panic, not fear, readiness. And here's a small retention truth. The hardest part isn't the big storms you see in dramatic footage. The hardest part is the constant, low-level unpredictability that makes normal feel negotiable. That's what tests people over years, not days. So the question becomes, what does a normal day even look like here? In places like Svolvær, Henningsvær, Rene, and dozens of smaller communities scattered along the islands, life is shaped by two realities at once. The first is isolation distance from major cities, limited options, long drives that look short on a map but don't feel short in weather. The second is intimacy. In small towns, you can't disappear. Not really. The person behind the counter knows who your family is. The mechanic remembers your car. The teacher remembers your older sibling. That closeness can feel comforting. until you want privacy. Then it can feel like the walls are made of glass. But it also creates something rare: reliability. When winter is heavy, and the road is slick, and the sea is loud, community stops being a nice idea. It becomes infrastructure. People check on each other. They share updates. They help without making it a performance. And this is one of the first open loops we can close from earlier. The identity of Lofoten isn't so nothing you find in museums. It's built into behavior. It's in the calm way people respond to delays, in the way we'll see is not indecision but wisdom. Because up here, rushing is how you break things. There's a pace to village life that visitors often romanticize. They call it slow. But locals know it's not slow. It's seasonal. In summer, the islands can feel like they're running on extended hours. The light stays late. People work long shifts. Businesses stretch to meet demand. Hikes that would be impossible after work in most places become normal, because the day seems to refuse to end. Then winter comes and tightens everything. The light shrinks. Travel becomes cautious. Social life moves indoors. And what looked like a gentle lifestyle reveals its trade-off. Fewer options, fewer distractions, fewer places to hide from your own thoughts. That's the part no thumbnail shows. So how do people handle it? Many develop rituals that feel simple from the outside but are powerful when you rely on them. Coffee breaks that aren't just caffeine, they're a reset. Shared meals that aren't just food, they're anchoring. A habit of planning loosely, so disappointment doesn't become a daily companion. And in Lofoten, this isn't just about personal mindset. It's about tradition, work traditions especially, because these islands have always been defined by what people do with their hands. In the colder season, a specific kind of energy returns to the harbors. You'll see it in the way boats are prepared, in the way conversations shift toward conditions and timing, and in the way the shoreline starts to look more industrial than postcard. Not ugly, functional, honest. This is where Lofoten's identity becomes unmistakable. A place that never stopped being a working coastline, even as the world began to visit it like an open-air gallery. And that creates a quiet tension. Because when you live somewhere beautiful, you don't get to experience it the same way tourists do. For our visitors, a harbor is a photo. For locals, it's a workplace with risks, deadlines, and bills attached. So here's a microhook worth holding. The same landscape that attracts millions of camera shots also demands constant labor to survive. And the clearest symbol of that labor is something you can see almost everywhere: structures that look ordinary until you know what they mean. We'll get to them soon. The growth of tourism has added a second rhythm to daily life. In summer, the roads carry rental cars and camper vans. Cafes stay busy. Small shops thrive. Guides run tours into the late evening light. For some families, that seasonal income makes the entire year work. But then there are the questions locals have to live with all year, not just in July. How do you keep a village livable when demand spikes for a few months? How do you protect a fragile coastline when thousands of feet arrive at once? How do you keep peace when the same road has to serve both everyday errands and someone's once-in-a-lifetime adventure? Not every place has to solve that. Lofoten does. This is where the postcard versus reality contrast becomes sharp. Lofoten is not built for endless expansion. The mountains rise quickly. Flat land is limited. Roads have constraints. And nature here isn't just scenery. It's the reason building anything is complicated. Which brings us back to something we hinted at earlier. Logistics. When a place is far north and spread across islands, getting things here becomes part of daily life. Groceries, construction materials, repairs. Equipment, much of it has to travel long distances before it reaches a small store on a windy shoreline. And when travel depends on weather, time becomes a cost. This is why living here can feel unexpectedly expensive in small, practical ways. Not always because prices are outrageous, but because convenience is rare. Selection is smaller. Timing matters. And sometimes the best strategy is simply buying what's available. Because what you want might still be somewhere south, waiting for a calmer day. That's not a complaint. It's an adjustment. Even ordinary routines reflect it. Getting to school, commuting to work, visiting family on another island, it can be easy on a clear day and slow on a difficult one. People learn backup plans, they learn patience, and they learn something else that outsiders often miss: a strong sense of competence. When you grow up in a place that demands adaptability, you become quietly capable. You learn how to dress for wind, how to drive with caution, how to time your errands, how to respect the sea without fearing it. That competence becomes part of local pride. And it's also why the people of Lofoten can appear calm in situations that would frustrate most of us. They're not numb. They're trained by experience. But now we need to zoom out again, because the village pace, the community closeness, the seasonal rhythm, all of it traces back to one foundation. We're tied to the sea. In the next part, we'll follow that foundation deeper. Why fishing became the backbone of these islands, how it evolved, and why the modern version of Lofoten is balancing two worlds at once: one that harvests from the ocean, and one that sells the dream of standing beside it. And we'll finally reveal the ordinary-looking structures that quietly explain how climate here shapes not only people, but food, culture, and survival. If you stand near a Lofoten dock before sunrise, you can feel the islands wake up in a way tourists rarely see. The quiet isn't empty. It's focused. Boots hit wet boards. Ropes slide through gloved hands. Someone checks the wind without saying a word, because out here, you don't argue with conditions, you read them. And then the boats go out for the view, for the work. For centuries, the sea has been the true employer in Lofoten. The mountains might dominate your camera roll, but cod has dominated the calendar. These waters are famous for seasonal migrations that bring fish toward the coast, turning remote harbors into places of urgency and purpose. This is one of those details that flips the postcard story on its head. Lofoten isn't a scenic backdrop that people happen to live beside. It's a workplace that happens to be stunning. And that's why the central question why starts to answer itself. When a place can provide, people build their lives around it. They build skills. They build traditions. They build communities that can handle the hard months, because the sea, at the right time, makes survival possible. But that right time never arrives gently. Fishing here demands respect. The ocean is cold, and the weather can change with brutal speed. Even now, with modern equipment and forecasting, the sea still carries the same old message: you are a guest. So, the people who do this work develop a mindset you don't learn in comfortable places. They plan carefully. They move efficiently. They rely on each other. And they accept that some days, the smartest decision is to wait. But that patience is not passive. It's protective. Here's a micro hook to keep in mind. The fishing industry isn't just boats catching fish. It's an entire chain of life on land that depends on what happens offshore. And once you see that chain, you understand why these villages are placed where they are and why they still face the sea. Roll. Fish being unloaded. Forklifts. Sea. When the catch comes in, the harbor transforms. Fish are unloaded quickly. Work is coordinated. Some people are at sea, others are on land handling logistics, sorting, transporting, preparing. Even people who never step onto a boat can find themselves tied to the rhythm, repairing gear, maintaining engines, running small businesses that support the fleet, keeping the community functioning while others chase the season. And over time, Lofoten's fishing culture evolved. It had to, because modern life doesn't leave traditional industries untouched. There are regulations, quotas, sustainability concerns, changing markets, new technologies, and pressure to do more with less time. The work remains, but the rules around it become more complex. For some families, that complexity is the hardest part. Not the cold, not the wind. The uncertainty of a livelihood that depends on both nature and systems far beyond the islands. And still, the sea holds its position as the backbone. It shapes identity. It shapes pride. It shapes the stories people tell about themselves. But Lofoten has also become something else. Because while one part of the economy pulls from the ocean, another part is now built on the idea of simply being near it. Tourism. In the brighter months, the islands fill with visitors chasing a specific dream. Dramatic peaks, red cabins, midnight light, and the feeling of standing at the edge of the Arctic world. And in a way, the dream is real. But here's the contrast that creates tension and makes this story worth watching. For locals, tourism isn't a fantasy. It's a second season of work layered on top of the first. New opportunities, yes, but also new pressures. A cafe owner doesn't just serve coffee, they manage crowds. A homeowner doesn't just live in a house, they navigate demand. A quiet village road doesn't just connect neighbors, it becomes a route for thousands of people who don't know its limits. And because the landscape is so tight, mountains rising quickly, narrow coastline, limited flat ground growth can't simply spread out. It compresses. This is where Lofoten begins to feel hard to live in a modern sense. Not because life is miserable, but because the islands are asked to be two things at once. A home and a destination. In summer, that can bring energy and income that helps small communities thrive. It creates jobs beyond fishing guides, drivers, chefs, photographers, maintenance crews, cleaners, small shop owners, people running tours, and people keeping accommodations running when the sun barely wants to set. But then autumn arrives, and the question shifts. What happens when the season leaves? That's another quiet retention hook. Seasonal economies create seasonal lives. Some people chase summer work hard because winter will be quieter. Others rely on a mixed fishing, tourism, remote work, small local services to stitch together stability across the year. This is not a simple story of tourism good or tourism bad. It's a story of balance, and the people of Lofoten are constantly rebalancing. Because the very thing that makes Lofoten famous, its dramatic beauty, also makes it fragile. Trails erode faster. Roads feel narrower. Parking becomes conflict. Housing becomes complicated. Some residents worry about losing the quiet that once defined their villages. Others welcome the new economic options, especially for younger people who might otherwise feel forced to leave. And that's an open loop we'll explore later. When young people look at their future here, what do they see? A place of opportunity, or a place with limits too tight to ignore. We'll come back to that. But to understand how Lofoten holds on to identity while the world arrives, you have to look at something that sits quietly between old and new, something you've probably seen in photos without realizing what it represents. Tall wooden frames near the water, long, simple beams arranged like and scaffolding. In summer, they look like minimalist art. In winter and spring, they become something else entirely. They become proof the climate here isn't just endured, it's used. Because in Lofoten, the air itself has been an ingredient. And this is the loop we teased earlier, now beginning to close. Those ordinary dash-looking structures are not decoration. They're part of a tradition that turned cold wind into preservation and a seasonal harvest into food that could travel, food that helped these islands survive when survival depended on planning months ahead. In the next part, we'll step into that tradition properly. Stockfish, drying racks, and a food culture shaped by weather so completely that it feels like the islands themselves are part of the recipe. And as we do, we'll also follow another thread. How modern infrastructure, bridges, tunnels, ferries, roads changed what remote means, and why even with all that connection, Lofoten can still feel like a place that asks something from you. Because the scenery is the invitation, but the lifestyle is the price. Along the edges of Lofoten's villages, there's a structure that looks almost too simple to matter. Tall wooden frames, rough beams, rows that stretch toward the sea like unfinished scaffolding. Most visitors photograph them because they look Nordic. Locals know there's something else. They are one of the clearest examples of how people here stopped fighting the climate and started using it. For generations, Lofoten has been tied to a particular kind of harvest. Seasonal cod fishing that arrives with urgency, work, and a deadline you cannot negotiate with. Because catching fish is only half the story. The other half is what you do with it when winter is still present and the sea is still capable of turning. This is where the drying racks, often called gel in Norway, enter the picture. They don't preserve fish with smoke or fire. They preserve it with something far more reliable up here: cold air, steady wind, and time. At the right time of year, the conditions in Lofoten can be strangely perfect for drying cod. Cold enough to slow spoilage, breezy enough to keep air moving, stable enough sometimes for the process to work the way it has for centuries. And here's the retention hook. The product that comes out of this isn't just local food. It became a way for these islands to export survival. Dried fish could travel. It could be stored. It could turn a short, intense season into value that lasted. In a place where winter can cut you off from easy supply, that matters more than any trendy cuisine ever could. This tradition also reveals something important about Lofoten's mindset. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is wasted. People learned early that the difference between comfort and struggle can come down to preparation. And the landscape is part of that preparation. The wind that makes your eyes water on a bad day can also be the reason food lasts. The cold that makes winter feel endless can also be the reason preservation is possible. It's an elegant trade if you have the patience to accept it. But that patience comes with its own cost. Because traditional methods require consistency, attention, and experience. You don't just hang fish and forget it. You need timing. You need knowledge. You need to understand when conditions are right and when they'll ruin everything. And that kind of knowledge doesn't come from reading about Lofoten. It comes from living here. Food in Lofoten is often described with one word: simple. But simple doesn't mean basic. It means practical. It means shaped by the coastline. It means flavors built from what survives the season. For visitors, the idea of climate-shaped food feels romantic. For locals, it's just the continuation of a logic that never stopped being true. When you live far north, the environment is always part of the equation. And if the racks represent how people learn to store the season, the next question becomes, how do people move across these islands when the season turns against them? Because Lofoten looks like it should be disconnected. It's a chain of steep mountains and narrow shorelines separated by water and weather. For much of history, the sea was the only reliable route. But modern life demanded something new: connection. Today, a network of roads, bridges, and tunnels links much of Lofoten together, threading between peaks and across narrow sounds. Driving here can feel unreal not because it's fast, but because the road seems to have been negotiated into the landscape rather than imposed on it. And that difference matters, because even modern infrastructure up here is built with humility. The islands don't offer endless space. Every bridge is a decision. Every tunnel is a compromise. Every road must survive salt, wind, ice, and the constant wear of a place that never fully relaxes. So yes, you can drive between villages. You can cross bridges that place the sea right beside your wheels. You can watch mountains rise like walls in your rearview mirror. Bro. But here's the microhook that keeps the story honest. Connection doesn't erase difficulty. It just changes where the difficulty shows up. A road doesn't stop a storm. A bridge doesn't make winter gentle. Ferries still matter. Flights can still be delayed. And when conditions turn, even short distances can feel long. That's why locals don't talk about travel the same way visitors do. Tourists talk in kilometers and viewpoints. Residents talk in conditions and timing. Is the wind coming? Is the pass clear? Can we make it before the weather shifts? It's a different way to measure distance, not by map, but by reality. And now we arrive at the choice that sits quietly behind every beautiful image of Lofoten. Leave or stay. For young people growing up here, Lofoten can feel like both a gift and a limit. The gift is obvious. Nature at your doorstep, a tight community, a sense of belonging that big cities rarely offer. The limit is just as real. Fewer schools, fewer career paths, fewer industries, fewer chances to experiment without being noticed. So many leave for education and opportunity, often to larger Norwegian cities, because if you want certain careers, you can't always build them on a small island. That isn't a failure of Lofoten. It's geography. But here's what makes the story interesting. A surprising number return. Sometimes they come back because they miss family. Sometimes because they want their children to grow up with space and sea air instead of traffic and noise. Sometimes because modern work makes it possible to live far from corporate centers, as long as the internet is strong and the community is stable. And sometimes they come back for something harder to explain. The feeling that life here is more real. But returning doesn't mean ignoring the trade-offs. People who come back know what winter feels like. They know what limited services can mean on a hard week. They know what it costs to live somewhere that cannot expand easily, which opens a loop we're about to explore next. If Lofoten is so beautiful, why does it still feel difficult, especially now? Because the challenge isn't only nature anymore. It's modern pressure meeting a small landscape. And that's where the phrase starts to make sense. Paradise has a price. In the final part, we'll look directly at what that price is. The cost of living, the housing strain, the winter limits that don't care about your plans, and the difficult question every famous place eventually faces: how do you welcome the world without losing the thing the world came to see?